was a time when power was easy to locate. You could just simply draw it on a map. Empires would go across land, claiming territories, extracting resources, reorganizing different societies, all under the name of profit. Colonialism was visible. It was material. It was violent in ways that was impossible to ignore. But today, something just as powerful is unfolding in the world. And it doesn't really look like colonialism at all. It's not ships, it's not borders being redrawn. And yet, extraction is everywhere. Not from land though, but from something that's far more intimate. Our behaviors, our movements, our thoughts, and essentially just our life. What's strange about data is that it rarely feels like a resource. We don't experience it in the way that people experience land being taken or labor being exploited. A click, a swipe, a pause on a video, like how you're going to pause this video to grade me. It all seems quite small. But what if these small, seemingly insignificant actions are not incidental at all? What if they are the raw materials of a new economic system? Scholars like Nick Coldry and Ulysses Mejijas describe this shift as data colonialism, a system where human life itself becomes a site of extraction. At its core, capitalism has always depended on turning more and more aspects of life into value, to a point where human labor itself was transformed into something that was first embedded in daily life to something that was measurable, exchangeable, and sellable. That is what Karl Marx calls the commodification of labor. But that transformation didn't happen naturally. It required reorganizing society. And something similar is happening again. Today, what is being transformed isn't just what we do, but how we live. Our movements, habits, preferences, even our attention are being reshaped into something that can be captured and circulated as value. Not because data simply exists, but because the world is increasingly structured to make it in a way that it's extractable. This is what Coldry and Mejijas call data relations. Systems that configure everyday life so that data can be continuously produced and captured. Not occasionally, not intentionally, but constantly. To understand the power behind this system, we would have to rethink what surveillance means. Earlier forms of power relied on visibility, something that Michel Foucault explored through the idea of the panopticon. The idea was simple. If people believe they might be watched, they begin to regulate themselves. But what we're dealing with now goes further. It's not just about being watched. It's about continuously being recorded, stored, and analyzed, and most importantly, predicted. As Shoshana Zuboff argues, this is a system where human experience is captured as data and then used to anticipate and shape future behavior. Power no longer observes what we do. Instead, it intervenes in what we could do next, which kind of makes it harder to recognize because it doesn't really feel like control anymore. Instead, it's more like personalization, recommendation, or like even convenience. And this becomes especially visible in the idea of the smart city. A city designed to be more efficient, more responsive, more optimized. Sounds on surface level almost utopian. Traffic flow optimized in real time, energy use reduced, urban life going smoother and more manageable. This ambitious attempt was actually proposed by Sidewalk Lab, a subsidiary of Google. Their plan was to build a neighborhood in Toronto where the sensors were embedded in the environment itself. Streets that track movement, buildings that monitor usage, public spaces that record patterns of interaction, a city that could essentially learn from its residents. But for a city to function that way, it kind of needs data, and the data comes from the people. Every step, every interaction, every moment spent in space. You're essentially just living, and data is being collected from you. You are not doing anything, like we would scroll or we would like something or pause something or do some type of interaction, knowing that, okay, they are taking a cooperation is taking some form of data from us. Instead, you are just simply existing in a public space, and your data is just being collected from you, and you don't essentially have any say in this. You don't log in, you don't opt in, you just simply exist, and your existence itself becomes the data. The city just stops being a place where life happens. It becomes a system that reorganizes life into something measurable instead. This is exactly the type of data relation that Kolji and Mehi has described, where participation is no longer optional because the environment itself is designed for extraction. And once life becomes structured this way, colonialism, well, the logic of colonialism just becomes visible again. Cities become territories, people become resources, and extraction, well, it's just embedded into infrastructure itself. But data colonialism, it isn't just something that's being tested in experimental cities. It's already embedded in the platforms we use every day. Social media doesn't just connect people, it structures how we interact with each other. Every scroll, every like, every pause, what is being produced is data. This is what media theorists describe as audience labor, where users generate economic value simply by engaging. And the more you engage, the more the system learns, the more precise it becomes. But this data isn't just being used to understand behavior, it's being used to predict it and increasingly shape it, which means you're not just using the platform anymore, you're being modeled by it. And to fully understand what this means, we need to think about representation itself. And this is where Jean Baudrillard becomes essential. In modern societies, representations no longer simply reflect reality. They begin to replace it. This is what Baudrillard argued. What we interact with are not things themselves. They're models, simulations, what he calls simulacra. In data-driven systems, the version of you that matters the most is not your lived, complex, unpredictable self. It is in fact a constructed model, a data double, a version of you made up entirely of patterns, correlations, of probabilities. If you liked this, then if you watched this, you might like this. If you clicked here, you might go there. And over time, this doesn't represent you. Instead, it's actually just organizing the world around you. The content you see, the options you're given, the decisions made about you. All of these are filtered through this simulated version, which in hand creates a feedback loop. You generate data, the system models you, the model shapes your environment, and then the environment shapes your behavior, until it becomes difficult to separate where you end and where the system begins. At that point, simulation is no longer secondary to reality. It becomes operationally more important than reality itself. What makes data colonialism so powerful is not at the scale at which it operates, it's how normal it feels. There is no clear time where you're forced into the system. Participation is woven in everyday life, and that's what precisely is what makes it effective. Because once life itself becomes a source of value, there is no outside. The question is no longer whether data is going to be extracted. It is whether we are willing to live and accept to live in a world where existence itself is being translated into something that's going to be owned, analyzed, and sold. Not occasionally, not partially even, but literally all the time.